I was making a lot of decisions based on outside perception versus what I truly wanted.
By no means is this a statement made out of misogyny, but I think that it is easier to play on the emotions of women than it is to play on the emotions of men.
I could have been using that money to invest in other vehicles, but I wasn't because I thought, like I said, I thought the money was always going to be there at that same level. Welcome to Beyond Her Hustle, the podcast where we empower ambitious women to redefine success, find healing, and create a life of abundance beyond the hustle. Join me as we explore topics like financial literacy, healing, well-being, relationships, personal and career development, and holistic success. Get ready to break free from the hustle and step into a world of limitless possibilities. I am your host, Nicole. Let's embark on this transformative journey together. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond Her Hustle. And today we have another special guest. I know that the last few episodes, we've been talking with some amazing individuals with helping you as an ambitious woman start to build wealth in every area of her life. And today we have a guest who I've been watching him on Twitter for a while, and he gives out amazing information. And it's hard to find people online who are actually certified in the financial field to educate and give this type of information. And when I saw him, I said, you know what, we have to get him on the platform because you guys know I talk about some of the financial traumas that I've gone through. And I know that based on your guys' feedback, a ton of you are dealing with similar things. And I had to bring on the platform Mr. Rahkim. Welcome to Beyond Her Hustle. I am so excited for this conversation.
Yes, yes, I am excited too. Thank you for the warm welcome.
Absolutely. So, Rahkim, can you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what your background is?
Yeah, I'll answer in a reverse order. So my background is banking. I started in the banking industry in November and I left banking in May of 2020. During that time, I was exposed to a lot of product services, customer interactions that made me want to get deeper into understanding financial literacy and how to use those products and services to my greatest advantage. And in talking about some of these things with peers, family, and friends from back home, I realized that there was a need for this financial education. And for a long time, I was very anti credential. I wanted to shine a light on the people whose lived experiences, mine included, could add value to the space. And in 2021, I think it was January or February of 2021, got the certified financial education instructor designation. Because as a coach, I had so many people coming to me and they're saying, what makes you credible to talk about this? And my lived experience just wasn't a good enough answer for a lot of them. So fast forward, today I am a financial coach who focuses on financial trauma specifically. So the intersection of mental health and money. I leverage financial therapy and financial counseling best practices in my coaching practice. I'm also a Forbes columnist. I am a TED speaker, two-time author. I've been featured in everywhere you want to be featured. And I think that it's super important to highlight this emerging field of financial psychology and financial therapy because so much emphasis is placed on financial literacy as like the silver bullet to solve everybody's problems. But what I've found during my time in this space is that there are a lot of people who know what they should be doing, but for whatever reason, and we can get into that in this conversation, they don't do it. So what are those obstacles that prevent you from doing what you know you should be doing? And how is it tied into what you believe about money or what you were exposed to around money from a young age?
From all of the accolades and the accomplishments that you have, I'm just so excited to have this conversation with you because I know that it is something that affects our community heavily. And especially with majority of the listeners to this show are typically Black women. And I see it every day and I see it in myself oftentimes. And so I really just want to dive right in. When you say financial trauma, what does that mean?
Yeah, great question. So I define financial trauma as any instance that has a negative impact on the way that you view, interact with, or believe about money.
Mm.
Financial trauma is a hot topic right now. And so you'll have kind of a spectrum of answers to that question. What differentiates me from a lot of my peers in financial therapy is that most of my peers are talking about financial trauma from a purely clinical perspective, which I think is important and necessary. We need to understand the psychology of trauma and how that manifests in our lives. But as you mentioned, the African American audience or the Black audience that I serve, that you serve, we experience a different kind of trauma. And so I approach financial trauma through the lens of this larger generational trauma that starts with slavery, right? That starts with our history in this country and continues throughout history to present day, that influences this mistrust that we have for financial products, systems, services, that influences what we believe about money, how we spend money, how we interact with money. What is the programming that we see on television and the music across social media? What are the perceptions that other people have of us as it relates to money? And so all of these things combined are an intimidating topic, I think, for a lot of people to approach, particularly non-Black people to approach. And so they leave it alone. Whereas I run directly to it because I think when we talk about this intersection of wealth, mental health, and race in the same conversation, not only does it normalize the fact that these are all variables that we live with, but it educates other people who may not be in the community as to what are the unique struggles that we experience. I'll run it back. Financial trauma, any instance observed or experienced that has a negative impact on the way that you view, interact with, or believe about money. Um, and as a caveat, most of our beliefs about money are solidified by the time we are 7 years old.
Wow,
So if
really?
you think about, yeah, so if you think about all of the conditioning and the programming that we have between the time that we're 7 and the time that we start making money and the time that we become financially independent in the sense that nobody's taking care of us. There's so much relearning and unlearning that needs to be done. And that's why I'm here.
That's so interesting because you don't really think about how impactful your childhood can be on your adult life. And even me recently learning about some of the different childhood traumas that I've experienced and how that's affected me as an entrepreneur and business owner. But I never knew that the way that we perceived finances can be set that early on. When you're 7 and below, you don't even understand what money and finances are.
Yeah. And you touched on so much. So as an entrepreneur, like it's really you versus you. And so you go in and you have to look at this mirror of what am I made of and what are my limiting beliefs around how I show up, imposter syndrome. What do I do with this money once I make it? How do I make this money? And so a lot of those traumas do surface on this journey. But even for entrepreneurial people, people who have the 9 to 5 and they're perfectly content to do that, I've seen instances where, especially with the tech hiring boom over the pandemic, people experience life changing increases in income, and they're like, "Oh, I got to go and get the high rise apartment, and I got to go buy the Tesla or the G wagon." They have to make their lifestyle demonstrate how different now life is because they're making so much money. And then we saw at the beginning of this year, towards the end of last year, all of the layoffs occurring in tech. And it's just, that's another traumatic hit to your system because not only did you not move past the trauma that you experienced that you're trying to run away from by spending more money, but now you're in a situation where you're not even making money. And it really is an interesting paradigm. But thinking about, yes, the influence or the impact rather of what we observe in our early years. I think specifically within the Black community, we can all relate to the you got McDonald's money
Yeah. Yep.
conversation. And it's like we all live the same life.
If you are enjoying this type of content from Beyond Her Hustle, make sure you go to beyondherhustle.com and join our growing community. There you can find additional resources, exclusive trainings, workshops, and so much more within our community. So make sure you go to beyondherhustle.com.
But like that is potentially shaping what our beliefs around money is. It's speaking to scarcity, right? And maybe the lesson is, yes, we have food at home, but the lesson is also, well, we don't have that for you to indulge right now. And so when McDonald's is treated as a luxury or a treat that says, okay, we'll do this once in a while, we'll have the pizza once in a while, without explaining what is the reason for this. Is it based off of concerns around nutrition? Is it based off of concerns around budgeting? And are we explaining what budgeting looks like so that we can make informed decisions? Or as a child, are we just having a temper tantrum because we couldn't get the Happy Meal that we wanted to show off to our friends, right? And that's a very tiny example, but unfortunately, the reality is for a lot of people, especially if they are growing up in a two-parent household, because whole nother conversation for another day. If your parents are arguing about money, how is that going to impact you? Are you going to feel shame or guilt, or fear when it comes to talking to your partner about money, or when it comes to what you feel is within the realm of your control financially? Or if you're in a single parent household, situations around child support and visitation, and you didn't pay child support, so you can't see the kids. Like, there's a lot of insanity within our community that unfortunately is perpetuated through this generational trauma that I'm talking about, and it has financial implications that unfortunately echo through the rest of our lives, at least until the point where we become conscious of it and we start making changes.
An interesting point that you brought up about the tech boom and large increases of income, because we also saw that happen with this influencer era, right? With the online coaches and course creators, because I was one of them where my brand blew up in 2020 and my income increased by 10 in a very short amount of time. And one thing that I did right away was as soon as my income increased, I increased my lifestyle. So I started moving into the high rise apartment. Then I kept trying to upgrade and got into the top floor penthouse and was spending literally 5 figures just to live somewhere. I went and got multiple vehicles right away. And it wasn't until early this year where I had my awakening, I call it, to where I realized that I was doing all of those things because of the perception that I wanted to have. I needed people to know that I was really making the type of money that I said that I was making, and so many other things that went into it. But I realized that I wasted and really made a lot of financial mistakes because of just internal feelings that I had. And so I'm really curious about how to approach that, because there's a lot of influencers and creators that I see every day doing the exact same things that I did. How do we approach that or handle that?
Yeah. So my approach to personal finance is still the same. Like, personal finance is personal. And so I move away from conversations that shame or guilt people for the choices that they. And so when I'm listening to you, and I was party to this change, right? As I followed you on TikTok back in 2020, I saw the explosion. I saw, what you were showing, and I understood why you were showing it. But it creates a perception for your audience that says, okay, she's getting it, I want to get it too. And I imagine that based off of what you were demonstrating, that you also saw an increase in sales, right? People were like, oh, she's getting to the bag, I want to get to the bag as well. And so the influencer era is really interesting because you have to play that game, right? The lifestyle marketing, in order to get buy-in, unless, oh, you're borrowing your lane, you don't have it. And certainly a topic like financial trauma, where it's increasing in popularity now, was not necessarily considered popular a while ago. Like, it was considered a boring topic. For people who are in a position where they're experiencing these drastic increases in income, I think that it is okay for them to splurge or to increase their lifestyle as long as that is within their value set and they're making decisions that are financially responsible. And really, it comes down to the individual to determine what that looks like. So, if for you, your values include having luxury and you have the income to support what that luxury looks like, I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. But if your motivation behind achieving luxury is to show somebody else, then there's the mismatch in values, right? That's not how you feel internally. You're demonstrating that for somebody else. And I think traditionalists in personal finance would be like, oh no, you don't increase your lifestyle expenses. Be frugal, get the whatever, the basic of whatever, drive the Honda, read the millionaire next door. And that's just very old school thinking. I think money is a tool. And so what do we use that tool for? To buy back time, to buy experiences, and sometimes to buy things. So I would say for anybody listening that this constant tug of war between what are your goals and what are your values is something to be explored. And an exercise that I often have clients do is write it down, right? What is important to you at the core of who you are? Is that charitable giving, right? Is that tithing? Is that being able to spend time with family or being able to be there for family financially, emotionally, or otherwise? Is that making money? And for some people, the value is placed on making money. And as a result of those values, then how do you align those goals to meet those values? If you can't, if you're telling me that your goal is to save six figures or to invest six figures or whatever, and you're splurging on sections at the club or high rise apartments or the newest cars, there's a conflict there. How do we make those things closer together so that you have the ability to enjoy the fruits of your labor and you're able to stay focused on or stay on track to accomplish the goal that you set for?
That makes sense. And like I said, I know that is something that a lot of I've heard a lot of feedback as I've been more open and transparent with my journey, as far as coming to the realization that I was making a lot of decisions based on outside perception versus what I truly wanted. And that resulted in just having a taking a toll on my own mental health. But a lot of women have come forward after I've created this platform just talking about similar experiences to that. Are there common struggles that you see a lot of women who are they have good careers or they have maybe high revenue businesses? Are there common struggles that you see as far as that financial trauma aspect?
It's interesting you asked that question because another hot topic, if you will, and I'm sure you party to this on social media, is the successful or financially secure woman in dating.
Yes.
What does that look like? Yeah. What does that look like in terms of pursuing or being pursued by a partner? And then what does the conversation look like if you are making more money than your man, right? Or the man that you're dating? And we're in 2023, so not every woman wants to be with a man. But when it comes to like partnership and who is the quote unquote breadwinner, what does that look like in terms of how you tie your value to the amount of money that you're making in comparison to how you show up in that relationship or in that partnership with whoever you decide to partner with? So I've seen that happen quite a lot. Those conversations around money kind of surface where maybe the partner is making less or significantly less. And so there that creates a little bit of conflict between who does what are the roles here, and who can say. I think a very popular or maybe well-known current event is the whole Kiki Palmer situation,
Mhm,
right?
right.
Where a lot of dialogue was had around how her child's father went on Twitter and made a comment about something that he didn't like, and everybody had an opinion about it. Another really popular one was Gabrielle Union and Dwayne Wade, and when she talked about the 50-50 household thing. And so as I see more of these conversations circulate and certainly the feedback to those conversations from people on both sides of the spectrum, I think again, it goes back to that conversation of values and goals and how you show up, how you articulate that And how do you feel comfortable with in who you are and what it is that you do to attract the person that will be comfortable with that as well? I'm not a relationship expert, but I'm not going to pretend to be in this conversation. But I think that, well, financial trauma will surface in so many different areas of our life, whether that be in terms of our physical fitness, whether that be in terms of the relationships that we pursue, whether that be in terms of the work that we do, right? There are a lot of people who are overworking because they're in pursuit of money because they want to feel safe. There are people who hoard money. So they make a ton, but they're saving greater than 50% of their income because they just want to create such a big cushion and put so much distance between the potential for them to experience poverty that they don't allow themselves the opportunity to enjoy what it is that they make.
Mm.
There are people who don't make enough. And so trying to figure out, what do I do? What tools are available for me to use? What business can I start? What courses or coaches can I hire so that I can make more money, and it puts them deeper in the hole? So there's so many different ways that this shows up. And it's unfortunate because there are people out there who are aware of this, and there are people out there who prey on that. I'll raise my hand and full transparency. And when I left my job in 2021, like, I freaked out. I was like, okay, what am I gonna do? Like, how am I gonna do this? And I hired a coach. I hired an agency, marketing agency to run Facebook ads for me. And I'm like spending money that I don't even have with the hope of 10xing my return. And then I was left holding the bag, right? Okay, this didn't result how I thought it was going to result. So that created trauma because it's like, is this going to prevent me from wanting to invest in myself in the future? Is this going to prevent me from wanting to invest in a coach, from wanting to take a course, from wanting to outsource services that are just not within my wheelhouse of skill sets? Or am I going to turn around and invest the time in trying to learn something that I could be spending my time doing something else? And so I know this experience occurs across the board for everybody, but I would just say for professionals, whether you are entrepreneurial or intrapreneurial, that going back to the drawing board around what are your values, what are your goals, how do you align those two things together so that you're not jerked around in different directions based off of what you're on social media. There are a lot of people who are operating out of survival. And as a result, everything's an emergency,
Yeah.
right? Financial anxiety is a thing. Financial stress is a thing. And so when you're operating in a place of survival, you're just trying to figure out how to get to tomorrow. And so when that expert marketer or salesperson swoops in and tries to sell you a dream, that looks like, okay, I'm at the oasis, right? I can drink in this oasis while I'm traveling through the desert, and it just puts you in a worse situation. But if you understand what your values are, what your goals are, and those things are aligned, you can hear that and you can say, does this move me closer towards my goal? Is this aligned with my values? It sounds good, but I'm going to keep moving in the direction of this plan because I have my values and my goals aligned.
And the times where I've maybe been scammed or lost money on an investment is usually when I invested in a very like a desperate state. So I was in that survival mode and I was like, I just want to try to flip this as fast as possible. Anytime I've ever had that mindset, it's never gone the way that I thought it was going to go. And I made a post the other day talking about how it's hard to thrive in survival mode. And I had a few people leave comments asking, how do I get out of survival mode? Because I understand how challenging it is when you don't have a ton of money in the bank. You don't really know when your next check is coming, if it's coming, and the check that is coming is not enough to sustain. How do you not operate in survival mode during that time frame of your life?
Yeah, so I have two answers for this because it's going to vary based off of an individual's experience. My first answer, and this will probably be more like the clinical side of addressing this, is to recognize your safety in that moment, right? So your brain does not have the ability to distinguish between a perceived threat and an actual threat.
Hmm.
So an example that I I stole from somebody else's. If there's a tiger standing in front of you, right? Your body is going to start dumping adrenaline, right? You're going to go into fight or flight mode, and you're going to try to figure out how to get out of the situation. With financial stress, a lot of times that same reaction is occurring, but there's no physical tiger in front of you. And so the difference between having that physical tiger in front of you is that you go back into normal mode when the tiger is gone. But financial stress and financial anxiety tends to linger because the issue is still there. And so getting into, or rather getting out of survival mode requires that you recognize that in this moment, you are safe. Like you are not, your life is not threatened. You have a place to live, you have hot water, you have food. And once you calm down and you're able to start using the front of your brain, the part of your brain that's responsible for rational thought, then you can start creating a plan to get out of the mess that you're in, right? So I acknowledge and identify, look, I'm in a situation, I'm not making enough money or I'm spending too much money. How do I get out of this situation from a rational mind instead of, oh my God, like the bills are due tomorrow. What am I going to do? So that's the clinical side. The like real side, right? Like the street side, not that the clinical side is not real, but understanding like people's experiences, particularly poverty, is that it's not that easy for you to go out and just get more money, right? And so maybe your perceived threat is an actual one. And there are professionals who are specifically trained to help at least show you what the options are, right? In terms of getting out of the situation or managing the situation better. But the problem is that either people don't know that those professionals exist, or their ego or their shame or their guilt prevents them from seeking out the help that they need. And so if somebody is truly motivated to get out of survival mode, then they're going to exercise all the resources available to them. And that's going to come back down to understanding what's coming in, what's going out, and how you make more of it. How do you increase your income? How do you decrease your expenses? What are the different avenues that you can take to develop a skill set that can be monetized? And not every skill set needs to be monetized. But if you're in a situation where you need to make more money, what can you do with what you have in this moment? And the threat might be real, right? You may have negative $3 in your bank account and you're hungry, your stomach is growling, and you also, the light bill is due. And if you don't pay the light bill, then they're going to cut it off. But a lot of times in those situations, we wait until the very last minute before we do something to start seeking help. Given that same example, you have negative $3 in your bank account, you're hungry. Are you aware of what food pantries are in your area, right? Are there low cost or no cost food options available to you? Your lights are getting ready to be turned off. Did you call the power company and say, hey, look, I'm experiencing financial hardship. What programs exist for a little bit of assistance here? And if people just start opening up and sharing, I'm in a situation right now and I need help, they'll realize that there are resources available. I have pause about sharing that because I think there are so many people who get caught up in the cycle of dependency based off of knowing that these tools exist. And so again, and this is going to be the mantra of this conversation, right? Going back to your values and your goals, do you want to be independent? That's a very real question. Or do you want somebody to take care of you? Do you want to work? Do you want to work harder? What does that look like? Do you want to increase your skill set? Are you comfortable making yourself uncomfortable so that you can have a better life for yourself? And the reason why I have pause about this is because it's such a, and the way that it's delivered in like the mainstream social media, it's almost accusatory, right? It's like, you're not working hard enough, right? You're not doing a good enough job. You need to get up there and you need to be waking up at 5 a.m. And,
Right.
and I don't believe in that. I believe that balance is necessary, but I also think that it's important for us to understand what options are available to us and certainly to swallow our pride and getting ourselves out of a situation that we're in that we don't want to be in by taking advantage of those resources.
You really said a key word with pride because I know that it can be challenging, especially if you are someone, maybe you're used to making a certain amount of income and that income drops, like you mentioned with the tech layoffs. And I know that there's a lot of business owners that are not doing as well as they were back in 2021. So when that income drops, it's very challenging to get over that pride to then say, hey, I might need some help or some assistance until things pick back up. That's a very hard place to be in. If you are enjoying this type of content from Beyond Her Hustle, make sure you go to beyondherhustle.com and join our growing community. There you can find additional resources, exclusive trainings, workshops, and so much more within our community. So make sure you go to beyondherhustle.com.
Yeah, I can relate. I can relate personally. Over the last 2 years, being an independent entrepreneur, I've experienced peaks and valleys in terms of income. There's days where it's yes, I got a big win, and then there's days where I'm like, I don't know where this money is coming from next. And so, so many people on social media, particularly business owners, we talk about the age of the influencer. They highlight their wins, but they don't talk about the losses very much. And when you're working for yourself and when you're building towards something, whatever that looks like, there's some people that are very content being solopreneurs. There's some people who are very enterprising and they want to hire a team and they want to be responsible for paying salaries. And whichever path you choose is cool. But back in 21, I went viral on Twitter because I quit my job. It was like, yeah, like I'm done. I fired my boss, right? And so, so many people gravitated towards me because of that messaging. And it made me feel like I could never go back now because so many people are banking on my success. And I shared a post, I think it was last year sometime, where I joked about going back to work. And somebody on Instagram either commented or sent me a DM and they're like, if you go back to work, I'm going to lose all hope. And I'm like, I don't claim that responsibility. What I did for me, I did for me. But as somebody who has influence, you can fall into the trap of how is this going to translate to my audience? If I go back to work, am I going to let people down? If I go back to work, are people going to feel like I failed? Am I going to feel like I failed? And so as I have this conversation with you from a position of expertise around financial trauma, I also want to have this conversation with you from a position of being a human, right? Like just because financial therapists and financial counselors exist doesn't mean that they don't need financial therapy and financial counseling. Just because there are successful entrepreneurs doesn't mean that they didn't have off seasons or they don't have off seasons. It's really for somebody who it is entrepreneurial, like the value is in being an entrepreneur. We're going to deal with the tough parts of what this journey looks like because it's a value of ours, but it's not a requirement by any means. There are people who they go out, they do their thing. They're like, all right, cool. This was fun. Like now I'm back to security.
Right.
It is a lot easier to have a job. It is a lot easier to be able to count all your income. It's a lot easier to budget from the perspective of knowing what you're going to make every 2 weeks. It's a lot easier to save. It's a lot easier to invest. There's so many positions that I had on money when I was making money in a corporate setting that have changed
Mm.
when I started having to make money for myself. And I'll be very honest, as much as I love like this entrepreneurship grind, there have been many points in time over the last 2 years where I'm like, I think I might have to go to work. I think I might have to go apply for a job here. And then there have been instances on this journey where I've been offered a job and I'm like, no,
Mm.
like this doesn't align to my values. This year, back in February, I was offered a job that would have been my dream job while I was still working in corporate.
Wow.
It was a VP of marketing position for a local credit union. They were paying six figures. They wanted somebody to start immediately. They had a hard time filling the role. And as we're having the conversation, I'm talking to the recruiter. I'm like, yeah, that all sounds good. The money sounds good. That sounds good. But am I going to have to stop doing what I'm doing with my business? Like I am a public facing and right. I'm writing for publications. I'm podcasting. I'm going to conferences. I'm speaking. Am I going to have to stop doing what I'm doing? Because if the answer to that question is yes, then this is not for me. It's a non-negotiable. And I haven't told the story very frequently publicly, but at that particular point in time, I was experiencing an extreme low in income. Like I had missed a couple car payments low. And I'm like, am I stupid right now? Like I had to call my dad afterwards. I'm like, I just turned down $100,000 a year job because they won't let me do my social media stuff, but that's what my values were. And I felt very strong spiritually. I felt very strong emotionally. I felt very strong in terms of practicality that the decision that I made in that moment was the right decision. And that's not necessarily going to look the same for everybody.
And that's really a powerful story and a powerful message because when you're not aligned in your values, it's very easy to make decisions based off just a dollar amount, right? So you'd go and take that position or whatever other opportunity that might be there, but then you're not following the path that you originally have set out for yourself. And I think that can create a lot of resentment in the long term and a lot of mental health problems and just so many other effects that come from that. And I can understand it's hard to sometimes turn down certain contracts because it doesn't align. But I think in that moment, the main thing is really just seeing the bigger picture and thinking more long term instead of just thinking about the present. Because when you make decisions based off that the fastest route to money, that can have such lasting effects. And there's been times where I've made decisions just based off of the money and I come to regret it later. It's like that wasn't even worth the amount of money that I was paid for it. So that can be definitely a hard place to be in.
100%. When I did some digging into the role and the role and responsibilities after the fact, I realized that not only was the position underpaid, but it was literally two different positions combined into one.
Wow.
It was marketing and business development. The marketing department, it was one person and it would have been that person, right? So like you're responsible for so much for so little. And when I think about everything that I've accomplished since then, within my own business, within personal branding, the different features, the people that I've met, just the impact that I've had, I know that if I would have stopped at that point, so much this conversation probably would not be happening. So it's exactly what you said. Being able to think long term, to adhere to that plan. I believe very much in abundance, and I believe very much in you can get what you ask the universe for, certainly, but you're going to be tested to see how bad you want that thing. And that test is not going to be just one test, right? It's going to be a series of tests to see, do you really, is this really what you want? Because if it is, here's a challenge, here's another one, here's another one. But when you come out on the other side of that challenge, and often a lot of people just, they cave under that pressure, right? So they'll never know what their potential looks like. But when you come out on the other side of that challenge, that's where the magic. And you've heard the story a million times, right? Steve Harvey talks about being homeless, right? So many other celebrities talk about like they were on their last dollar before they hit their big break. And so many people just they give up too soon. But again, goes back to the idea of well, what is your values? What is the difference between the person who weathered homelessness and made it and the person who gave up too soon? And it's really, there's no shame there, but if you gave up too soon, was your value really aligned to making this thing happen or was it aligned to survival? Was it aligned to taking care of your family? Was it aligned to having some money in your pocket? And no answer is the wrong answer, but it's just, it's very individual. And I think that's where more time and attention needs to be placed, highlighted in these conversations about entrepreneurship, about financial goals, about financial promise. Like so many people are chasing the goals of somebody else that they saw on social media or on TV or in a magazine or whatever, instead of figuring out what do I really want for me and what am I willing to give up to get that thing.
You mentioned the word shame just now when it comes to approaching finances, because I know that I followed different, I don't know, financial leaders. I don't know if that's what you would call them, like the Dave Ramseys and people like that. And so I'm curious what your perspective is on having more of a shameful approach to money, because I could be just throwing it out there, but a lot of women, especially Black women that I've talked to, I feel like we all tend to have that like shameful approach when we think about money.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned Dave Ramsey first because he is like notorious, right,
Yeah.
for using shame in his messaging. But so is Robert Kiyosaki, and unfortunately, Grant Cardone does too sometimes, right? There's just this: you're not working hard enough, or you're not saving right, or you don't want it bad enough.
Mhm.
It's just like you're speaking to an audience of potentially millions of people. Who are you to say how bad somebody wants something, right? And there's this very thin line between accountability, like holding somebody accountable, and holding space to be empathetic to where they are. And for too long, I think the trend in personal finance and those financial influencers or leaders has been pointing the finger. You did this wrong. You should feel bad. Bad you. Go back to the drawing board. Go do this. And it doesn't allow people to really explore what they want and how they want to live. Given the example that you gave earlier, we talked about you're experiencing this massive increase in income, and certainly your lifestyle increases with that income. But that's not necessarily wrong. It's just, was that aligned to your goals, right? If you could afford to spend 5 figures a month on an apartment or in a penthouse, like, cool. If that's what your goal is, if that's what you want your life to look like, there's no shame there. It's not wasted money. It's how you chose to spend your money. But quote unquote finance bros and these influencers like have you second guessing the things that make you happy or the things that give you passion by pulling you into making a decision that maybe you didn't want to make. And I think right now the most popular hot topic on this is home ownership, right? There is a lot of conversation being had around whether or not you need to own a home to be wealthy or to be well off. And my experience was back in, I don't know how old I was, but I read Rich Dad Poor Dad and I'm like, I want to go buy a house and I'm going to go buy a multifamily house. And this is what that's going to look like. And so I did. 26 years old, I bought a multifamily house and I'm like, cool. And to this day, it's the best financial decision that I ever made. But on the other side of understanding financial trauma, I also recognize that growing up in New York on Section 8, seeing eviction notices on the door, like all of those things influenced what security means to me. And so maybe my decision to go out and buy a house or my passion and enthusiasm around building wealth comes from the fact that I didn't have wealth and I didn't come from wealth. Comes from the fact that there were nights that I was hungry. Comes from the fact that there were days that I came home and that eviction notice was on the door and I was ashamed or embarrassed and hoping that nobody walked past and that nobody saw it. And so unpacking all of those things while sitting in my multifamily house, it's just like, damn, did I make this decision because I wanted to make this decision or because I felt like I had to make this
Mm.
decision? And so much of the content that we see on social media, whether that's Instagram or Twitter or wherever, is leveraging shame to make people make decisions. And because so many people, and I'll speak specifically to Black people, to poor Black people, because there are wealthy Black people who've never experienced poverty, but so many poor Black people who have been historically excluded from the financial systems, these financial products and services, who are just learning about them for the first time, or who are the first generation owners, or the first generation investors, or the first generation credit people who got the 700s and 800 credit scores. Raising my hand, they have the pressure of carrying their entire family dynamic, their entire generational dynamic on their own financial success. And that can cause trauma, right? I wrote an article for Forbes about how the black tax shows up in that the one successful person who escapes has to take care of everybody else who wasn't successful. And how is that not, or how is that fair on the one hand, but what does that do to somebody psychologically? Where it's, damn, like, I got to stay on my stuff because I mess up, like, my whole family's going to be feeling it, or I'm going to be viewed as the failure. And I like that you highlight Black women specifically, because I think that, and this by no means is this a statement made out of misogyny, but I think that it is easier to play on the emotions of women than it is to play on the emotions of men. And so when those choices financially are tied into an emotional response that says, you're a bad partner, or you're a bad mother, or you're a bad sister, or you're a bad person because you didn't do XYZ, or because you don't have your finances in order, or because you're not funding and financing my lifestyle, or because you're not buying me gifts, or because you can't fly me out, right? And that coupled with this narrative that is such a toxic narrative that we see in music and media that has Black women portrayed as like these gold diggers who want to be flued out. And I've seen some crazy stuff on social media. The craziest thing that I've seen recently is that women are charging men a DM fee. In order for you to DM me, you have to catch up. Yeah. And I'm like, that is so insane. But it's also genius as an entrepreneur, because I'm like, how many people slide into my DM? How many people slide into your DM? Hey, I want to pick your brain. And I'm like, oh, I have a booking link for consultations. I should just put in my bio, oh, you want to pick my brain? You got to send me a $25 DM fee. But there's so many variables that exist within the culture that we subscribe to, or that we're forced fed, that influence how we as a people show up, but certainly how Black women show up, and what security looks like for Black women, like physical safety, what mental and emotional safety look like, what security looks like in a relationship, what what value looks as a person, right? I'm not a Black woman. I don't pretend to know what Black women go through on an individual level, but I know that the challenges that Black women face, particularly as it relates to just showing up, are are difficult. They're hard, and inversely, the challenges that Black men face just by virtue of waking up and breathing and living life are hard. Well, where we don't spend enough time is coming together and saying, I see the challenges that you experience as a Black man. I see the challenges that you experience as a Black woman. These experiences may look different if you're looking at it from the perspective of us as individuals. But when we come together collectively, like, there's a greater problem that needs to be solved. And I will always say, I can find an angle where financial trauma surfaces. I think a lot of the source of our issues is economic,
Mm.
and the economics can influence power and what power dynamics look like in the voting system. It can influence education and what education looks like for us, so that we're not taking out these student loans, or that we are going into fields where we can pay back these student loans. In terms of relationship dynamics, in terms of our own financial security dynamic, there's so many variables, and we don't talk about them from the position of being on the same page enough.
Oh, I absolutely agree. These are definitely conversations that just don't happen. I feel when you think of most, especially right now on social media, podcasting is very big, right? But typically, when you're thinking about that dynamic, it's never really about anything that matters about finances or some of the other dynamics you just mentioned. It's always some offlandish relationship stuff. But I am really curious about your perspective because you mentioned the whole like getting flued out, and we're in the era of the city girls and charging for DMs. And I see that a lot, especially in hip hop culture, which I can't really talk about any other culture because I don't know, but that's the only one that I pay attention to. Do you think that's linked to maybe some of the financial traumas that we've endured as just a culture as a whole? Because right now that's huge with the sugar daddy, the man should be taking care of you. You got to have the Birkin bags and this and that. Is there a link in between there?
My opinion is yes and no. So I'll start with the no first, right? I don't think that this phenomenon is unique to Black people. I think that it is amplified and highlighted as, in the way that you said it, as an aspect of hip hop culture. And if you dig into the history of hip hop, you'll very readily find that is not by accident, right? The way that hip hop is marketed, the amount of money that goes into marketing drugs, sex, violence to Black people is not by accident. And the way that hip hop started is very different than the way that hip hop looks today. There was conscious rap, there was political rap, there was just I'm chilling rap, right? And none of that is mainstream. None of that is popular today. But what's popular is drugs, alcohol, sex, city girls, city boys,
Right.
everything in between, right? You really get to understand this when you travel outside of the United States because the perception that non-Americans have of American Blacks specifically is what they see on TV,
Mm.
what they see through the hip hop culture, reality TV, this and that, right? But if you stand up the Kardashian family, who is hailed as these just genius marketers and businesswomen, and you look at what is their claim to fame, same thing, right? Kim Kardashian became known because of her and Ray J's tape, right? And that's where everything took off. Now she's been able to go through several rebrands, including Law, right? She's had the privilege of being able to do that. But if Cardi B was to turn around and do the same thing, would she be taken seriously? I don't know. If Nicki Minaj was to do the same thing, would she be taken seriously? I don't know. And so I think I don't want this to turn into a conversation about the man, but I do think that some of the positioning that we're in as a culture is definitely by design. Now, whether or not we play into that, that's where accountability really lands. And so that's where the yes to my answer comes in. Financial trauma, gotta eat, right? Gotta put food on the table. And so if this is what sells, if this is what is being promoted, if this is what is going to give me the bag, then hell yeah, I'm gonna do it. And unfortunately, this is the one time that I'll say unfortunately, when we go back to that conversation about values and goals, it looks like the values are placed on money over anything else. Now, I could talk about it all day, but I think that kind of answers the question, right? Those you look at people like John Morant comes to mind, right? I wrote an article about John Morant for my newsletter and went viral with no promotion, no paid ads, nothing. I think I had well over 30,000 views of this article talking about financial trauma in that this man is under 30 in his early 20s, making $20 million a year, having fun. Like he didn't come from that kind of money. So he might, I introduced this term, he might be experiencing financial invincibility. And what that means is I got money and this money is always going to be here. So I could do whatever I want. I'm good. And I wrote the article with the intent of taking the heat off of Job because I felt like so many people were critical of him and so many people were pocket watching. They're like, oh, he's going to mess up the bag. Like, why can't he just be a good boy and do what he's supposed to do and play basketball like LeBron? But he's a 20-year-old.
If you are enjoying this type of content from Beyond Her Hustle, make sure you go to beyondherhustle.com and join our growing community. There you can find additional resources, exclusive trainings, workshops, and so much more within our community. So make sure you go to beyondherhustle.com.
On the other side of that, though, the accountability is in who is in his corner, not instructing him like, okay, you're making this money. what are you doing with this money? How do you ensure longevity with this money that you make? Because multiple times now he's been suspended for a number of games. He's still getting paid, but what does that look like for the future? I forget what this other guy's name was. Zion,
Oh, yes.
the former porn star. She's going crazy on Twitter and trying to make him lose out on opportunities financially. And he's just, I entertained the rabbit hole for a little while, but she's posting screenshots of money that he's sending over to her, $20,000 a clip, $10,000 a clip just to spend time with her. And I'm like, okay, get how you live it. Like he was doing it behind the scenes, but she put it on blast. But when you're in your 20s and you're making that kind of money and you're throwing $20,000 here, $10,000 there, it seems of no consequence to you. But what are the things that he could have been spending $20,000 here, $10,000 there on to build wealth for him in the future? And so the concept of financial invincibility is real. Like you experience this life changing income overnight. What's the statistic? I think within 5 years, 80% of lotto winners go back to nothing. I talk about financial trauma through the lens of how it impacts Black people because I'm a Black person. But I want to be clear in saying that financial trauma surfaces and impacts everybody. It's just the way that we experience financial trauma is amplified based off of the experiences that we are still navigating through a generational trauma that has us in this really like difficult position in trying to establish what it means to be successful, what it means to wield power, what it means to have wealth, and what it means to continue that wealth into the future generations.
That's really so powerful. And I've never heard the term financial invincibility until right now. And I realize I think that's a part of the equation of the things that I was going through when I started my business and my social media brand in 2020. And I felt like the money was just going to be there forever. I was going to continue to keep making that same amount of money. And so I was making these very drastic lifestyle changes, spending money on things that I definitely could have gone without. I could have been using that money to invest in other vehicles, but I wasn't because I thought, like I said, I thought the money was always going to be there at that same level. And so when the money dropped off, I hit a very bad depression because all of my worth and my value was stuck in that amount of money. And so it's very interesting that you said that term because I have never heard that until right now.
Yeah, I made it up. Yeah, I made it up, but I made it up to illustrate that point. You really captured it. You hit the nail on the head there. It's just like this idea that okay, I'm getting it now, so I'm never not going to have it. And when you look at what the average income is for an American, period, right? And then you drill down into what the average income looks like for Black American, Black male, Black woman, with high school degree, with high school diploma, with college degree, et cetera, et cetera. That pales in comparison to these multiple millions of dollars that these athletes are earning or that these entertainers are earning. And so I think it's so interesting that people have so many things to say about people who are making money that I'm not going to say that they'll never see, but that they likely haven't touched because you could get drunk off of that, intoxicated off, hey, like I'm making money is always going to be here. I don't think that I ever would have touched 1 million. So I'm making 20 million a year. I'll never burn through that. But then you start burning through it
Right.
because you feel like it's always going to be there. I thought it was important to illustrate that point in that article, and I'm glad that it resonates.
Oh, it definitely does. And I know that's something that a lot of people listening right now could probably relate to because it's not something that's taught. When we're taught to make money, have these careers, have these businesses, but no one is talking to you about the other side of making your six-figure career or having a 6 or 7 figure business. Like what all that encompasses. No one talks about that. No one talks about that financial like intelligence that you have to have outside of just the financial literacy portion of it. There's so much maturity and intelligence that you really need to have in order to sustain and maintain that type of money or wealth.
Oh yeah, there's there. There's emotional intelligence, there's financial intelligence, there's self-awareness, there's so much. I would go as far as to say that people who experience those drastic increases in money need financial therapy. It's not financial therapy and financial counseling is not just for people who are experiencing financial hardship. It's for people who are having to figure out what is the healthy relationship between the money that I'm making physically and my mental health.
Mm.
Am I about to go crazy because I just made all of this money, right? Because you think about it, people who have addictive personalities, that shows up however it shows up. You know what I'm saying? There's all kinds of addictions. And so you think about what money gives you access to, you're going to self medicate and however you self medicate. The other side of that could look like financial hoarding, right? Some people just, I want to have money to have money. I'm stacking it up in my walls. I'm stacking it up underneath my mattress. I'm stacking it up in a safe deposit box. I want to make sure. I heard a story. I don't know who did it. I think it was a rapper. They were talking about how they had buried cash in their backyard or in
Oh,
their mom's backyard. They buried cash and then they went to go get it. And like most of the money was molded. And it's just like you're placing so much value on this piece of paper, right? This piece of cloth, and you're not identifying it as what it is. It's a placeholder, IOU for what it actually represents because maybe you didn't have. And I understand too, there are other influences, cultural influences that impact that behavior, right? During the time of drugs, like where people were really like drug dealers and stuff. I don't know if you watched the series Snowfall, but the amazing series where Franklin, the main character, Franklin State, played by, I forget his name, his real name, but
Idris something.
yes, he has so much cash just stacked and stacked and stacked because he couldn't put the money in the bank until he started playing at these high levels, and then they're doing international like money laundering type stuff. But as somebody who used to work in banking, there is a lot of focus on anti-money laundering efforts and counter-terrorist efforts, right? Banks are paying attention to how much money you're depositing in cash and where's that money coming from and how can we trace or track that? How do we document this process? When I was in the branches, there was CTRs, currency transaction report, where if you brought in over $10,000 in one day, not in one time, but if you brought in over $10,000 in one day, we had to fill out this report. Who are you? What's your ID? Where's the money coming from? What's your occupation? How much money you deposited? And if you had a business, what was the business called? And so there are these questions that are being asked because people go to great lengths to hide where the origin of their money comes from. And so for somebody whose money is dirty, like a drug dealer, they can't take it to a traditional bank. So if just imagine if you're a kid or you're the kid of a kid who witnessed their parents hiding money in the mattress or burying it in the yard. Like, you're like, cool, that's the way to save money. Because to your point, all we're taught about money is you have to save, you have to save, you have to save. But we're also navigating this mistrust with the financial institutions, right? I'm not going to invest because that's some white people shit. I'm not going to invest because whatever. And it creates this cognitive dissonance around what are people who are used to having money, like, what are they doing? How are they playing this game? And I think it's a heavy topic to get into and a little bit outside of the realm of where I focus, but these factors all matter as we talk about what do we believe about money? How does money make us feel? What did we observe about money growing up that is impacting how we interact with money today? What are the lessons that we're trying to teach or to not show, not demonstrate, not teach to our children or future generations? What are the motivations behind that? And then, like I said, as the mantra of this show, like, where is that line of intersection between our values and our goals?
And those are some questions that I think everyone should start thinking about because I think it'll open up your eyes to some of the things that you might be going through as far as your finances and the way that you approach money and your relationship with money. A lot of people don't even understand that they might have a toxic relationship with their money.
100%. I do workshops, and one of the questions that I ask when I open up is, "What is your relationship with money?" And I always get a kick out of the way that people respond because they start describing how they manage their money. "Oh, I could save better, but I'm an overspender," or "I'm a great saver, but I also spend a lot of money." And I'm like, "I'm not asking you how you manage your money. I'm asking you what your relationship with money is." But people are not asked that question, and so they don't know how to answer it because your relationship with money is, if I ask you, when was the last time you budgeted? And you tell me, and then I stop and I say, wait, hold on a second before you answer that question. What are you feeling right now? Are you feeling like you're in the principal's office, right? Are you feeling like I just put you on the spot? You're in trouble right now. You're experiencing anxiety. Your palms sweating. Is your mouth dry? What is the reaction that you're experiencing as I ask you this question? Or if I say, how much money do you have planned? Much money do you have put away for retirement right now? Do you have a life insurance policy? We're asking these questions that people are like, oh, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. That speaks about their relationship with money. And it goes deeper into this idea that, or rather not into this idea, but it goes deeper into this concept that money is an idea.
Mhm.
People don't realize, like, people look at money as just like, oh, this is a physical thing. I can hold it in my hand. Oh, again, it's paper, right? It's cloth and paper. You have to look at, what does money represent, and what does money represent to you? What does money allow for you to, what does money afford you in terms of being able to buy back your time and being able to experience things and being able to travel, being able to have education and being able to provide for your family. And of course there are levels, right? Like, you got to make sure that that you have the lights on and the rent paid or the mortgage paid first. But beyond that, is this acquisition, or is this desire to acquire wealth based off of the fact that you saw a soundbite on Instagram talking about generational wealth, or is it based off of something that aligns to a goal that you have for yourself, for your family, your immediate family, and for future generations? Because if not, then we need to dig deeper. And we need to figure out, like, what's going on here. And I think that, and this is going to be a controversial statement, I think that it's okay if you don't want to do anything with money, right? If you don't want to build wealth and you're perfectly content, like, living your life happily, and money is not a stressor in your life, and okay, because no amount of financial education is going to change that for you, right? You could be the most financially literate person in the world, but if you're like, you know what, I'm good. I'm okay making 20, 30, 50, $60,000 a year, and I'm not looking to leave anything behind, and don't have any children, or I don't want to get married. Like, all of these major societal norms that we have are being disrupted by the millennials and the Gen Z demographic that says, I don't want to do things that way anymore. And that's okay. But if that is not the life that you want to live, then those questions that we just talked about, those are questions that need to be asked, and that the individual needs to answer, not the educator, and saying, this is what you need to. Our job is to present options and show you a path and let you walk on it, not bully you into making this decision. And some people will disagree. A lot of people will disagree, particularly as it relates to Black people and Black wealth as a collective. But you can only lead a horse to water, right? You can't make it drink.
That's an interesting perspective because when you think about coaches, really in any space, but in the financial space, financial coaches or financial advisors, I tend to assume that they are saying, hey, you need to do this and this with your money. And so it's an interesting perspective that you've brought up. It's really deciding, what do you want and what does your path look like? Because there's so much pressure with the media, social media, and everything else to have certain goals and aspirations for materialistic items. This has to be your goal or you're not doing enough. And so that's such an interesting perspective that you said. It's really about going on your own path, whatever it is, however that looks for you.
Yeah. And it's a reset. It's a recent adoption, if you will. Like when I started coaching, I was like everybody else. Just like, nah, like you need to go out there, you need to open up that Roth IRA and you need to
Mhm.
save 20% of your income and do this and do that. Once I started studying the financial counseling and financial therapy and really taking heed to this mantra that I'm tossing around like every other financial educator, that personal finance is personal, I realized that so much of those conversations are guilting people into doing things that they don't necessarily want to do. And you're creating more tension, right? Because let's say I'm coaching you and I say, you need to be saving 20% of your income. You need to be investing in your Roth IRA. You need to make it a goal to have an 800 credit score. And you're like, I don't want to do none of that, but I'm going to try to do it because I'm paying this coach to tell me that I need to do this. And then we go into the next session. I'm like, so, how are you doing on your homework? Like, how have we moved the dial? And you're like, oh, last week I went out with my friends and we did Taco Tuesday and we did brunch. And oh, how much money did you put away? I didn't put any money away. That's going to frustrate me as a coach because I'm like, well, you're paying for my time, but like, why am I wasting my time with you trying to make you do something that you don't want to do? And so the coaching approach prior to having this informed financial counseling, financial therapy background was, I'm the expert. You're paying me for my expertise. I want to deliver results for you, but you're not doing what it is that I'm telling you to do. So what are we doing here? Where now, I'm not going to say that I don't care because that's certainly not the case, but I'm not placing so much accountability on me to deliver the results for you because you're not doing what it is that I'm bringing to you. And I have had as a coach to reframe my approach to working with people from telling you what to do. So I'm showing you what options are available and I'm going to hold you accountable because that's what you're asking me to do. But I want to understand at the very beginning, what are your goals? What are your values? How are we moving towards those things? Because if those things change over the course of time that we're working together, then I need to know so that I can adjust my approach to helping you feel better about what you need to feel better about. And we need to have a conversation about, do you just pay me to hear the sound of my voice or what are you looking for here? Because my values are not just to sit here and make money based off of hearing myself talk to you. My values are, if you're taking up this time slot, somebody else doesn't have it, right? So like somebody else wants to have this experience where they're gonna benefit more from what it is that I'm offering, and you're taking away that time from them just because you want to hear me speak. That's a different conversation. We don't have to go into a coaching agreement. We can go into a one-off consult or some kind of other agreement. So setting expectations is key, but as part of setting that expectation, I think a lot of coaches, especially self-proclaimed coaches, right? And I'm one. So I'm gonna throw myself in this category, right? But they'll beat their chest. Hey, I know I have this information. I've achieved this transformation. I'm going to help you achieve this transformation. There's like this pride and this ego that comes with, yeah, I want to see my clients XYZ. And it stings a little bit when your client, like, a quick story, it's relevant, but it's a little bit of a deviation. I was working with a client who told me that they wanted to be a coach. They wanted to be a particular coach. I won't say what kind of coach, but it was within a specific niche. I thought it was very interesting. We did I was running a special for a 30-day program, paid me up front. We're having these conversations. As we're moving through the different conversations, by the end of our time together, this person tells me, I don't want to be a coach anymore. And I'm like, what? Like it took you a whole month to figure out that you don't want to be a coach anymore? But I contained my excitement in that moment. And I said, you know what? You have experienced clarity. I did my job, right? Because as we're having these conversations and as I'm holding you accountable to the things that you say that you want to do, and I'm creating this plan for you and I'm telling you what you need to do, and you're not doing those things, you realize like, I don't want to put in the work to do what it is that is necessary for me to be successful in this. You've experienced clarity. Congratulations. But I got compensated for my time. And so there was value there. But as a coach, like my ego was bruised a little bit because I'm like, damn, like I really wanted you to experience this transformation and see the results that you told me you wanted to see. And so again, my approach has changed because just those two words, goals and values, like once you get to the bottom of that for your client or as the client, for anybody who's listening, who's not a coach, who's planning on working with a coach, if you're not clear what you want to get out of the interaction, then you don't need to be paying anybody to tell you what you already don't know you don't want to do. Because at the end of it, you're just going to be frustrated that you spent this money. You're probably going to call the coach a scammer because there's no results, right? Well, really, maybe the coach doesn't have the vocabulary to articulate that what it is that you got out of our time together was clarity and realizing that this may not have been what it is that you want. And I think it applies to every area, right? That applies to finances, that applies to relationships, that applies to education. Like I have a mentor and he says to me all the time, it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to go into a project knowing that project is going to end. And I personally have a hard time with that because I've always been like this perfectionist. And I'm like, if I say I'm going to do it, I need to do it. That's what it is. But the reality of the situation is like, it is. It's okay for you to change your mind. It's okay for you to receive information that then redefines what it means to accomplish this thing. And so many people get stuck and frustrated because they're stuck doing something that they don't want to do because they have this self-imposed belief that they have to write it all the way out after they realize that they don't want to do it anymore.
That's such an interesting point because I one of my earlier podcast episodes for Beyond Her Hustle, I talked about that because I struggled with that. I would get into a project where in the beginning I thought it was going to be great or a partnership or a collaboration. And then later down the line, I realized this is not going to work out. But I was so afraid to change my mind that I stuck it out, and I ended up losing every single time on the back end because I was so afraid to make that decision. And so I love that your mentor tells you that it is okay to change your mind because it absolutely is. But I think that might come into maybe some of like my people pleasing tendencies where I don't want to let people down. But that was something that was very challenging for me to overcome. But yeah, it's absolutely okay to change your mind on anything that you're doing if you feel like it is not serving you and your purpose or the direction that you really want to go.
Yeah. And I think that's true financially too. Like where I think there's so many examples at once, right? Like when I was a kid and I was told today when first started making money, I got my first job, I think I was like 15, 16 years old. And I'm like, well, what am I saving for? Oh, I'm going to buy the new PlayStation, or I'm going to go buy a pair of sneakers, or I'm going to go on, a trip to this place. But the cycle was always like spend and then you start back from zero. And so that goes into the financial education side of it, where it's like, what are we saving for? As a coach, as a financial educator, as a financial therapist, as a financial counselor, whatever your position is in somebody else's life, I think that it's super important to explain to them the why. As a parent, as a partner, right? Explain to them the why. It's not, we're not in the era of because I said so anymore, right? Because I said so doesn't explain the whole process. Like it doesn't explain your thought process. It doesn't give me the understanding of why I should submit to what it is that you're sharing with me or why I should even work towards what it is that you're sharing with me. And it starts to perpetuate like the cycle of up, down. And you have nothing to show for it at the end of it. If I knew when I was a kid that, okay, Rakim, you should save 10% of everything that you make from the time that you were 16 years old, not only would that have established an unshakable discipline, you think about I was 16, I'm 33 now, like twice my age, twice my life at the time, at that point, rather. And then you think about like time value of money tied into that. discipline. Saying like, and obviously you think, oh, if I could go back and do it all over again, I would do this differently, but maybe you wouldn't. But I didn't understand, what am I saving for? And so you tell somebody save, this is why you save. Tell somebody spend, this is what you're spending on. And so the other side of that for professionals and entrepreneurs, oh, you got to invest in yourself. You got to invest in education. For what? Right? Because what does that look like? I'm buying everybody's course. I'm buying everybody's program. I'm hiring everybody's coach. And I don't even know what I want to do. So like you're sitting on all of this knowledge and information, but you don't know how to use it. And I know I'm probably bursting a lot of bubbles right now. Like there's probably a bunch of coaches like, damn, he's giving away all the game. But it's because, let's be real, we also live in the era, as you talked about, the influencer era coming up and coming down. We're also, I think we're starting to peak and we're starting to come down off of the scammer era. The people who are positioning themselves as experts and taking advantage of people's ignorance because they're just on one page ahead of them, right? All they have to do is stay on one page ahead of them. And they're not understanding the why in their framework either. They're not understand, like, why should I pay you? Because this is what I was able to accomplish. What does that mean for me? Like, am I going to be able to accomplish what you accomplished? What are the set of circumstances that made that possible? Can you answer that question? Right. And I don't think a lot of people can, because again, people's values and their goals are going in different directions.
That's so interesting. And I think if you don't take anything away from this episode, one of the main things I definitely want you to walk away with is, first and foremost, it's so important for you to understand where your values lie, where your goals lie, because that's going to dictate, or should dictate, all of your decisions, whether it's financially or in your career or in your business. And like you said, I think a lot of people either just never really thought about what their values are, or they're doing things that go against it just for a quick dollar or whatever reason that they might have. And so I think that's really important, is for people to just sit down and actually think about that so that they can look at the reasons, the real reasons, not just the surface level reasons, but the real reason why they are making certain decisions when it comes to their money and their finances. Because I know when I sat down and I looked at my real values and then I looked at my financial decisions, I saw that it was not aligning whatsoever. And so I think that's a realization that many people will come into, but you have to have that self awareness and be willing to have those tough conversations with yourself, because it can be challenging to admit that, especially admitting that out loud.
Yeah. And an extension of that would also include having those tough conversations with people around you.
Mhm.
Full transparency, like this is an ongoing journey. It's not flipping a switch. It's constant like recalibration. So a couple of, it's about a month now, about a month ago, I went to visit a cousin of mine, right? Flew to a different state. Like I could work from anywhere. So I'm like, all right, cool. Like I originally had planned on just staying for a week. I ended up extending my trip by a couple of days. And then ultimately I ended up extending the trip by 2 weeks, by another week. So I was gone for 2 weeks. And up until that time, up until I got on the plane, my value was in eating like high protein, like no garbage, and exercising at least 5 times a week. Like I was going to the gym 5 times a week. During the 2 weeks that I was away, I ate terrible. I was eating Krispy Kreme and I was down south, Krispy Kreme and Chick-fil-A and Bojangles. And I'm getting put on to all of these like amazing foods that I don't have near me, and
Right.
sweet teas, and not going to the gym for 2 weeks. So I come home and I spend another 2 weeks trying to get back into the routine I had established earlier on in the year that I was stuck on. So it took me a minute to get back into a flow. It's still taking me time to get back into a flow where I am aligned physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, in terms of the food that I eat, in terms of the cadence that I'm working out in. It's so easy to break your habit. It's really difficult to establish that habit. So when you deviate from that, like I allowed for my values to shift because I wasn't in my normal environment. I wasn't in my normal routine. And then I had to pay for it. Like now I'm going to the gym and I'm like, man, this used to be super easy. And now it's like, it's hard as hell. Like I need to get back onto this routine. But like taking the step to get back into the routine was the first step, was the first physical step. The real first step was how do I realign my values and my goals? And to the point that you just made, what I should have done was enforced my values and my goals in that environment. Say, hey, look, cousin, like we're having a good time, but I need to work out. Like maybe 1 or 2 days, 3 days, tops. Like I'll chill, but I need to work out. I need to do something. This food that we're eating, like, it's no good. I don't care if we're paying for it. Like, we need to eat quality food. Like, can't be eating garbage. And it can be difficult, especially if you're having a good time, especially if you're having a good time with somebody that you really care about, family, friends, siblings, whoever. It can be hard to enforce that boundary and say, hey, look, like this is how I'm gonna do it. Either you rocking with it or you're not rocking with it. But I'm still gonna love you. Like our relationship is still gonna be the same, but this is the space that I'm in. This is what's important to me. Like how many times are we on a goal? And this is the definition of establishing values and goals, right? How many times do we have a goal and something comes up? Oh, and we're like, oh, I can make an exception today. And then that one exception turns into another exception, turns into another exception, turns into another exception. And finally you're like, what happened? Like I got lost in the sauce, right? So yes, having that honest conversation with yourself, but then being very loud and very proud about what your values and your goals are and how that shows up in how you interact with other people is also important. And that's probably, if not equally as challenging, more challenging because then you go back and you start beating yourself up. Have those conversations again around shame and guilt. Damn, I should have did this differently, or I shouldn't have not done this, or I really told myself I was going to do this and I didn't do it. And it discourages you and it maybe discourages you to the point that you don't even try.
Yeah, I can relate to that 100%. And I think that shows up in many different areas of our lives where, especially when you are dealing with people that you care about, it is hard having those conversations, but just upholding those, I guess, values that you set before. But like you said, it's hard to set that habit, but it's easy to break it. So I can definitely relate, whether it's, with fitness or financial or any other area. But I've learned so much just being on this call. And I hope that everyone who is listening right now, I hope that you've gotten some value out of this conversation. These are the types of conversations that I really want to bring to the forefront, which is the whole premise behind Beyond Her Hustle is helping women who are maybe struggling in different areas of their life and learning that you can have success in your finance, your health, and your wellness, but you have to have the resources, the information, and be willing to put in the effort and work to all those things. And so, Rakim, I'm so appreciative of the insight and the experience and the expertise that you've brought onto the platform. And I just know that the women, or really anyone who ends up listening to this, is going to benefit greatly. So I thank you for that.
I thank you for inviting me. It has been a phenomenal conversation.
Absolutely. And if for anyone who wants to connect with you beyond this show, is there somewhere that they can reach you?
Yeah. So all of my social media is my name. So it's at Rahkim Sabree. That's RahKimSabree. My website is also my name. So that's rahkimsabree.com. And my newsletter is my name.stack.com. And you'll have that link available for the show notes.
Well, yes, we will put all the information down below in the description. If you're listening to this, make sure that you are leaving us a review on the podcast platforms. Let me know what you thought about this episode. There was so much to learn and so much to take in. So I definitely hope you guys took some notes. You can view the video version of this on our YouTube channel at Beyond Her Hustle or on our website at beyondherhustle.com. And again, Rakim, thank you again for showing up and just showing out and just pouring so much into our audience. And everyone who is listening, thank you for continuously supporting and tuning in to Beyond Her Hustle. And we're going to catch you on the next episode. If you are enjoying this type of content from Beyond Her Hustle, make sure you go to beyondherhustle.com and join our growing community. There you can find additional resources, exclusive trainings, workshops, and so much more within our community. So make sure you go to beyondherhustle.com.